Ni hao, konnichiwa, shalom, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo.
Bienvenidos! Hey, my name is Gently. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are beaming out to you in the entire universe from the beautiful, historical, book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. Please help us spread the word by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pod, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, YouTube, Audible. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Really powerful episode for you today. First up, Joy McCullough is here to celebrate her middle grade novel in verse, Kestrel Takes Flight. Later in the show, Brandon Todd is here to celebrate his new picture book, Do You Really Know Flamingos? Hey, my friends, we have a brand new Reading with Your Kids certified great read, a musical Murdog Tale by Music Mermaid. There's something wonderfully sincere and joyful about a musical Murdog Tale. This is a book created with heart, imagination, kindness, and music at its core, and those qualities shine through on every page. Set in the magical underwater world of Merlantis, the story follows Nemo, Lucky Sharky, and his friends as they embark on adventures filled with friendship, acceptance, music, martial arts, and love. Along the way, readers encounter singing mermaids, magical wish rocks, loyal friends, joyful celebrations, and important messages about kindness, inclusion, and treating others with respect. A musical Murdog Tale earns the Reading with Your Kids certified great read seal of approval because of its uplifting spirit, musical creativity, positive messaging, and commitment to encouraging kindness, inclusion, imagination, and joyful family interaction through reading and music. This is a book that invites kids to not only read, but also to sing, dance, imagine, and celebrate friendship together. Congratulations to Music Mermaid on creating a heartfelt, imaginative musical adventure for young readers and families. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Fart Boy and Reeky Dog, Dino Doom. Fantastic new graphic novel written by New York Times bestselling author Joan Holub, who's written over 200 amazing books for kids. It's school sleepover at the museum. What could go wrong? Well, how about this? A snack-fueled explosion of garbanzo beans and peanuts unleashes a stink so powerful it brings the dinosaurs back to life. Now, Fart Boy, Reeky Dog, and their friends are in the middle of a dino-sized disaster. They have to solve tricky riddles, find missing bones, and stop the stinkiest villain of all, Professor Gravy Pants. Because if they don't, the dinosaurs could take over. Or worse, they could become Dino Dinner. This action-packed graphic novel is bursting with friendships, adventure, and enough laughs to shake the museum walls. If your kids love superheroes, if they love dinosaurs, and if they love to laugh until they can't breathe, then Fart Boy and Reeky Dog Dino Doom is the book for you. Because sometimes the power to save the world comes from the unlikeliest place. Grab your copy today and get ready for a reading adventure that's truly dynamite. Join us right now from Washington State. Our guest is here today to celebrate her middle grade novel in verse. It's called Kestrel Takes Flight. Please welcome to the show, Joy McCullough. Joy, it's a joy to see you.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be here.
Tell us about Kestrel. Who is this character?
So Kestrel is a girl who has grown up in San Diego in a very isolated and controlling church environment. Her grandfather's a pastor of a very small church, and she and her mom live with him, and he's had real strong control over their life. Until at the very top of this book, her mom has sort of whisked her away without his knowledge and taken her to Montana. And she doesn't know why they're there, why her mom would do that. And she suddenly is in a completely different environment, and has to find her way.
Well, without knowing anything more about the story, I think Mom's choice to get her away from a controlling grandfather pastor is a great idea.
Yes, thank you. As the book goes on, it becomes clearer, and it gets named, and there's an author's note too that talks about emotional abuse, because, Grandpa's not hitting them, but he's very much making them feel worthless and unloved, and like nothing they do is right. So yeah, Mom makes a good choice, but Kestrel's pretty upset with Mom at first, because she's only known one world, and now suddenly she's in this new world, and there are dogs in this new place, and she's afraid of them. And she has to go through the experiences she's going to go through to understand why her mom has done this.
Yeah. I have a strong faith tradition. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I'm still a member of the church. We go to celebrate Mass every week. However, I know that people in my church have committed incredible abuse, not only physical and sexual abuse, but that emotional abuse that you speak of. I luckily was brought up by a dad who taught me that the guys in the robe, they're just guys. And, and thankfully I went to a Jesuit high school where, that kind of message was also delivered to me. So I think I escaped most of it. But as much good as I think faith has brought into our communities, I think it is abused a great deal of the time. And I'm happy that your book starts to bring that up and make people aware of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that in Montana, Kestrel ends up wandering into a Catholic church and meeting a priest who is lovely and welcoming and not judgmental and not abusive and everything that we wish faith leaders would be, everything that, Jesus would actually be. And so because I didn't want it to be an anti-religion, that all church is bad, all faith is bad, for sure. But there are absolutely so many abuses. And I wanted to speak to those kids who may not even realize the situation they're in is abusive because it's all they've ever known. And a lot of times abuse, we think, well, I'm not getting punched, I'm not getting locked in my room, so I'm not being abused. But there's so much more nuance to it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Tell me, what inspired this? Was it something that you experienced growing up or somebody that you knew?
Well, so that element, I'm a pastor's daughter, I'm a pastor's granddaughter, and niece and cousin and sister-in-law, whole lot of pastors in my family. But I grew up in the Presbyterian church. It was not anything like the church in this book. It certainly had its problems. And I actually have an adult memoir coming out in August that's about abuse that happened to me in the church. But I have fictionalized it wildly. Like, this is not my church experience at all. But my interest in looking at how the church uses power to control certainly comes from some personal experience. But more broadly, the book was actually inspired. I had written a picture book that never sold, but I did all the research and I wrote it. And it was about penguins, which won't sound like it connects to this book at all. But that is because I learned in the research for this picture book that there is the smallest species of penguin. It's called a fairy penguin. And they live in southern Australia, and they are endangered by an invasive species of fox. And so those penguins are now cared for by this very specific livestock guardian dog called Maremma dogs, which are trained, and they stay on the beaches where these penguins nest and have their eggs. Still, no connection to my book in Montana with bears and dogs, right? Except the dogs. And that is because I had started writing a book where a girl and her mom in a similar situation go to Australia to work with these Maremma dogs that take care of penguins, when somebody announced a middle grade book of exactly that premise. And I went, oh, well, and sometimes when you hear another author has a book coming that's, you know, also about a girl who roller skates and then breaks her legs, it's all in the execution. You can probably both write that book, right? Mm-hmm. But this was so specific that when I told my agent, he went, oh, might not be able to write that book. And so I set it aside for a while, but I couldn't stop thinking about Kestrel and her mom and why her mom had whisked her to Australia. And I thought, that's the heart of the book. I was really excited about the penguins and the foxes and these big white dogs, that wasn't really the heart of the book. And so I was like, well, there are a lot of different kind of conservation dogs. I bet I can find one that will still give Kestrel and her mom somewhere to go. And so I dove into some more research on conservation dogs, and I found these Karelian bear dogs that get bred and trained in Montana, which is a real thing. And so that ended up suiting the story. But it's so funny to me that this story, which has nothing to do with penguins, was inspired when I was writing a picture book about penguins.
you know, one of the things I love about being the host of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is I get to take a look at authors and illustrators' creative process.
Yeah.
And it is so wild where ideas come from sometimes. And I love it. And I love that you're mentioning it because it's a reminder that there's value in all ideas. It might not work as what you're thinking about, but that idea could lead to something else and something else. And it might be 5, 6, 7, 8 steps down the line. You may forget about the Karelian bear dogs or the Maremma dogs, but still it got the ball rolling. And
for sure.
so
Yeah.
It's so important to keep your mind open. Get those, when the muse speaks to you, listen up.
I like to say that nothing is lost in writing because so often, I mean, it took me a really long time to get published, so there were a bunch of manuscripts. But even since I've been published, I have written manuscripts that don't sell. But even writing whole novels that don't sell, there is a reason I wrote those books. And whether it's because some little detail, you know, in that book is going to show up in another book down the line, or I learned a craft thing, I figured out a thorny issue that's going to then help me later. So yeah, we're always learning and everything can be used eventually in some way.
Yeah. Hey, I just had this crazy idea and I'm never going to use it and write about it. So I'm going to put it out there. Maybe you do it. Maybe a listener. I'm seeing this drawer full of manuscripts that haven't been sold, they're collecting dust. And one day the characters all get together and say, guys, we're going to do this. And they come together and create a crazy, I'm thinking, around the world in 80 days kind of crazy story.
Like a Into the Woods of all of my unpublished manuscripts where the characters from the different fairy tales all come together.
Yep.
Fun.
Yeah. And thinking, like one character runs into what? So what was she thinking about when she created you? And why did she put you away?
That's very fun.
Tell me, this is a novel in verse. We spoke a little bit about before we hit record. Novels in verse have become quite popular. I think the first 5 years of Reading with Your Kids, I don't think we covered any. And in the last 3 or 4 years, it's, we have one a month. And talk, please, a little bit about why you think they've become so popular.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. My debut novel was a YA novel in verse, and when my first box of author copies arrived, my mom was here, and she'd heard me talking about this book, my debut novel finally coming out. She picked up a copy, and she opened it, and she looked at me, and she went, "It's poetry." And I said, "Well, yeah, it's a novel in verse." But, I think people outside of publishing or English teachers maybe don't even know what that means. Mm-hmm. And she said, but it's for teenagers. And I said, yeah, it's a YA novel in verse. And she said, but why would you make it harder for them to read? And I think that comes from this idea that so many of us have from having come up through a traditional education system that, and all love to English teachers, but when I was coming up, so often we were given just archaic, we're trying to read Beowulf and understand it, and we think, oh, that's what poetry is. Poetry is hard, or Shakespeare, which I love, but you just try and sit and read Hamlet on the page, brutal, especially if you're 15. So I think we have this idea, my mom certainly had this idea that poetry is hard. But then she sat there and she started reading it. And after a few minutes, she looked up and she said, it's not hard to read at all. And I said, well, good, I'm so glad you think so. And I think that part of why novels in verse have gotten so popular in both middle grade and young adult, is that the white space on the page, the sparsity, there's so many fewer just words on the page when you open up and see that just big block of text. If you're not a confident reader, or even if you can read fine, but you just don't think you enjoy it very much, realizing, oh, this is going to go pretty quick, can be something that'll get a kid into a book, that'll let them buy in and say, well, I'll give it a chance. But also novels in verse or poetry, they tend to use poetic devices, that have, musicality to them. They have a rhythm to them. And there's a reason, we learn the ABCs with a song, or like I can still sing the 50 State song with them in alphabetical order that I learned in 6th grade. Songs and musicality tend to connect with the brain in a way. And I think that, it's not listening to music, but it's closer to listening to music than a traditional novel, right? And so those kind of rhythms and poetic devices, I think, can sometimes also be something that helps a kid hook into the story and be interested. And then I will say, this isn't why all novels in verse are popular, but for me, why I often choose the form, when I'm writing about something that is a tougher topic, like emotional abuse, writing it in verse allows me to strip away a lot of the extra details and express the trauma with just a few words. And the nice thing about that is that means the reader who maybe has experienced trauma themselves can experience as much as they are able to. But if it is emotionally too much for them, they don't need to fill in everything that's behind all of those words. And they can go past it in a way that's emotionally safe for them. Whereas somebody who wants to really feel everything that those few words meant can engage with it further. So I feel like it allows a little more emotional buy-in, for especially around those difficult topics.
It almost sounds, we talked to author illustrators here about how with picture books, you have to leave space for the illustrator to tell part of the story. Kind of sounds like the structure of poetry kind of creates those images and is telling the story in a different way than your words are.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I also write plays, and when I'm writing plays, it's also very stripped down because I'm only writing what people are saying. Oh, excuse my dog. Uh-oh. What that means is my husband came home. my dog is a little fearful of my husband. When I'm writing plays, I'm only writing dialogue, and I'm leaving space for the audience, but also for all the... I can back up here on this answer if you want.
Okay.
Hey, Batty, come here. My dog's name is Batty, which is for a character in the Penderwicks, which if you've got a middle grade audience, you know what? Okay. I'm going to grab her because if I'm holding her, she will quiet down.
Okay.
Hey, Batty Roo. Shush. Come here. Come here. Okay, chill out. Okay. I'm going to back up on that answer.
Okay.
So I also write plays, and when I'm writing plays, it's also very stripped down because I'm only writing what characters are saying. And that is leaving room for the audience, but it's also leaving room for all of the other participants in a play, right? It's leaving room for the talents of the actors and the director and the designers to also bring their talents to the page. And when I'm writing a novel, because I wrote plays first, it feels so strange to me sometimes to be responsible for every area, because as a novelist, I'm the costume designer, I'm the set designer, I'm responsible for painting that whole picture, right? And sometimes I like in verse, I don't have as much responsibility to paint every single detail. I can leave a little more space for the reader to fill that in.
Yeah. Now, in Kestrel Takes Flight, is it one long poem, or is it a collection of different poems seen through the eyes of different characters?
It's all from Kestrel's point of view, but it is broken up into separate poems. And then there are also interspersed some letters she starts to write to her grandfather. She wants to call her grandfather, but her mom conveniently drops her phone in the toilet at the airport. And gets a burner and says, oh, well, we just, we'll call Grandpa later. And her mom keeps putting her off from calling Grandpa. So Kestrel starts writing some letters, which she's not sending. And so they become a way she starts to talk to Grandpa about the way he treated them, and sort of start to understand that. So it's mostly poems, and then here and there are letters from Kestrel to her grandpa.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have a novel for adults coming out that is touching some of the abuse that you experienced. Was writing Kestrel also part of your healing process?
I think Kestrel's story is enough removed from mine. And I've written a number of other books prior to this that have dealt a little more directly with my experiences. So not as much. It's a memoir that's coming out in August, and that one was a whole other emotional experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But for this one, I really am writing a really specific experience that wasn't mine. I just happened to understand a lot of the dynamics, and wanted to write a character who was going through that. And one of the things I really feel is fundamental to middle grade is hope. I don't ever want to put a middle grade character into a situation that they are not going to survive, right? I think that we can approach tough topics in middle grade. I think there's very little we can't do in middle grade if it's something that middle grade age kids are experiencing. But I think it's crucial that in books, we're showing them characters who are going through those things, but are going to be okay. That can show the kid that they're going to be okay too, eventually, hopefully, someday.
Boy, these days, I don't know of anything some middle grade kids aren't dealing with other than maybe student debt. Unless, of course, their parents can't pay the bills because of their student debt. I don't know. Boy, what is it about middle grade audience that brings you joy as you're writing for them?
So I think for so many of us who love books and reading, we can trace that back to the books we read when we were 8 to 12, right? I mean, for me, it was the Babysitter's Club, and it was Narnia, and it was Ramona Quimby. Those books made me love stories. And I think it's so exciting to get to be sort of in on the ground floor with a reader. If I get to be the part of what makes a child realize maybe they enjoy reading, maybe they want to keep reading, maybe they want to write a story themselves, that is just so thrilling. And not to say I'm not happy to, hook an adult reader who is coming to it late. But I think it's really exciting to be a fundamental part of kids who are learning how they might interact with stories, and maybe inspire them to write or just to keep reading.
Yeah. This is going to be a different question. We encourage families to continue to read with their kids when they become independent readers, and to co-read, sit down, talk with the kids on the way to ballet, on the way during dinner, on the way to soccer. I'm imagining, and typically I'll ask an author, what kind of conversations do you think families can have? But I have a thought that there's at least going to be one kid out there who is going to read the book, and the parent is co-reading it, and the kid is going to start a conversation that goes something like, yo, Pastor so-and-so, or your grandfather, or who, is going to point out to the parent that our family is living in this abusive situation. Talk to that parent, give them advice on how they can handle that.
Well, I will say there's an author's note in the back, so this is going to be an off-the-cuff answer. Sure. But my author's note, I ran by my sister, who's a family therapist, to make sure that it was all, sound and good advice. So that'll be the place for a more thoughtful response. I would say, I don't think a kid would say that unless they feel like they're in a safe place to say that. So they might say that about grandpa who doesn't live with us or the pastor at church, but they're probably not going to say that to a parent who is controlling them. So that's good. I think anytime a kid is recognizing something and speaking to it, they're probably saying it to somebody they feel safe with. So that's good. But in that author's note, I do sort of explain, this is what emotional abuse is. And also this is what it isn't, because it would be easy as a kid. Yeah. This is so terrible, but when I was a kid, I remember if my mom was irritating me, there was a thing I would do where I would, in the middle of a grocery store, I would, scream and fall down and say, call Child Protective Services, I'm being abused. And I wasn't. I was being dramatic and ridiculous, right? And so I talk in that author's note about, if your parents take away your screens because you didn't do your chores, that's not emotional abuse. But if your parents make you feel like you're worthless because you didn't do your chores, and so I sort of lay out what the different things are and aren't. So I think a child who's maybe recognizing that dynamic, looking at those lists of this is emotional abuse, and this is maybe just somebody having a bad day. It's not a pattern. It's not, happening over and over. I think looking at those lists together could be very useful, because the kid might be pointing out something that's real, or they might be pointing out something that's an isolated incident, right? Grandpa yelled at me last time we were with him, So yeah, I think that could be really helpful. And I think that if you really do identify an emotionally abusive situation in that kid's surroundings, that then helping them get the resources they need. I mean, if your kid recognizes there's an emotional abuse dynamic within your family, going to talk to a counselor who's a professional is probably the next step. I've written a novel, and it's not my expertise. I've just told a story, I researched, I ran it by my therapist sister, but mostly I'm telling one character's story, right? But these are dynamics that affect so many people, and I think if a kid is recognizing them, honoring that and their courage in saying that, and then getting help, whether it's from a therapist or a clergy member, if it's a trusted clergy member, yeah. But I hope that kids who are in that situation, whether they're able to say it out loud to a parent or not, are able to come away from the book understanding that emotional abuse is as harmful as physical abuse, and it can be harder to recognize that it's happening to you.
Yeah. Now, I think you can get over a bloody nose a lot quicker than you can a broken heart.
For sure.
Yeah. Let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Kestrel Takes Flight and find out more about you, please.
Well, I have a website that's joymccullough.com. As an author, I'm really only active on Instagram. I'm at JMC Writes. And otherwise, you can find the book. I mean, it's not out till May 26th, but when it's out, it'll be anywhere you buy books.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Kestrel Takes Flight. It's a brand new middle grade novel in verse from our guest, Joy McCullough. Hey, Joy, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thanks so much for having me. You have a good day.
Hey, my friends, I want to tell you about a coffee company I recently discovered that really lines up with the values we talk about right here at Reading with Your Kids. It's called Afrera Coffee Company, and they're doing things the right way. The coffee is sourced directly from certified Rainforest Alliance farms in Central and South America, with a big focus on farms in El Salvador. I love El Salvador. They work directly with local farmers, support sustainable farming practices, and even use recyclable and combustible packaging. Now, all of that would already make me feel good about supporting them, but honestly, the coffee itself, it's fantastic. You can really taste the quality. The beans are grown in rich volcanic soil and carefully roasted, so the flavor really comes through smooth, rich, and super aromatic. Now, whether you're somebody who loves a strong espresso to get moving in the morning, or you prefer a lighter roast while reading a good book, Afrera has something you're going to enjoy. And this is kind of beautiful. 5% of all their sales goes to charities helping conserve and preserve the great outdoors. So if you'd like to try coffee that tastes amazing and supports good people doing good work, head on over to afreracoffee.com. That's AFUERA coffee.com, and use the promo code READ to get an exclusive 15% off your order. And of course, when you use the code, you're also helping support the podcast. Great coffee and helping families grow closer together. I call that a pretty magical way to start your day. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is sponsored by Ramble Office. You know, before I tell you about Ramble Office, let me tell you about what travel used to look like for me. When I take the Reading with Your Kids studio on the road, it was like a lot. I had one box for the mixer, another case for microphones, a satchel for my laptop, cables everywhere. And I always felt like I was forgetting something. That's why Ramble Office really clicked with me. Rambo takes everything I used to juggle, tech gear, personal stuff, and puts it into one smart, great-looking unit that's designed to be a mobile office, not just luggage. Everything has a place. Everything stays protected. And when you get to where you're going, you're ready to work. Instead of digging through bags or repacking your life every time you move, Ramble keeps your setup organized and ready to deploy. Travel days stop being chaos and start being productive. It's sleek, modern, built for people whose work doesn't stop just because they're on the move. And if your job follows you, whether that's podcasting, teaching, consulting, or creating, Ramble is worth a look. Go to rambleofficeanywhere.com, all one word, rambleofficeanywhere.com. Use the promo code READ, R-E-A-D, and receive 5% off any product. It's exclusive for Reading with Your Kids listeners. Check it out today, rambleofficeanywhere.com, promo code READ. Joining us right now from Kansas City, Missouri, our guest is here today to celebrate his brand new picture book. It's book one in a new series. The book is Do You Really Know Flamingos? Please welcome to the show author, illustrator, Brandon Todd. Brandon, how are you?
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm great.
Delighted to have you on. Brandon and I were just talking about how outrageous the ticket prices for the World Cup are. We're not going to go. We're going to sit and read about flamingos instead.
Yeah. We'll save our hundreds and thousands of dollars.
So tell us about Do You Really Know Flamingos?
So it's a book about an armadillo whose name is Frank, and he's an expert explorer extraordinaire. And he discovers a flock of flying or pretty princess birds and continues to give all these amazing facts about flamingos that turn out to be pretty inaccurate. And he doesn't really find that out, though, until he meets a flamingo. And the flamingo that he meets ends up setting the record straight.
What kind of crazy facts does the armadillo share?
So, favorite food of a flamingo, he says, is cotton candy, pink cotton candy specifically. That's what gives them their color, according to Frank. And the reason they are pink all the time and stand on one leg is because they are practicing to become ballerinas, of course.
Of course. Why else are they standing on one leg?
Right. Yeah.
Where'd the inspiration for this book come from?
I came from a couple of places. So, I mean, animal facts are just like endlessly fascinating, especially to my kids when they were younger. And there was one that I actually heard on a podcast about a flamingo years ago, so long ago, but it's always stuck with me. And it's in this book, actually. It's that flamingos can survive in a frozen lake in the mountains overnight, and then fly away in the morning when it thaws.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed that.
I know. First of all, like the fact that flamingos are in the mountains is pretty crazy, but then the fact that they get frozen in a lake, it's just all the things that you don't connect with flamingos is being challenged. And I just found that like really interesting. And with this book, I kind of wanted to address misconceptions and
Yeah. Tommy, did you in your research did you go and find any flamingos in their natural habitat?
No, just digitally.
Okay.
There are some flamingos at our local zoo, so I mean I did see them, but not as good as like actually going to see one in person in their natural habitat.
Yeah.
Not too many in Kansas City, unfortunately.
There you go. Hey, one of the things you mentioned that, you kind of inspired by your kids' interest in fun facts. I really love that because I think when we take the time as parents to kind of experience the same awe that our kids experience when they're doing something for the first time. There's so many things in our lives that we've done 1,000 times.
Yeah.
We don't even think about it anymore. For our kids, it might be the first time they're doing something like that. And it can really remind us of how wonderful life can be.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, experiencing, like you said, experiencing things through having kids for the first time just kind of makes you look at things differently. Mm-hmm. And then with kids, just everything feels magical. And I feel like, I mean, a lot of adults forget that, but then when you come across sometimes, a lot of the times my kids would come home with this fact that even I had never heard of and didn't realize. And it just kind of reminds you at the wonder still in the world all around you. That's just kind of waiting to be discovered.
Yeah. Boy, I remember my son was really big into that, coming home with, either some kind of encyclopedic book and just like, Poppy, did you know? And you just see how excited he would be.
Yeah, they love to learn. I mean, it's fun for them, especially at this age when they're younger.
Yeah.
If it's something that they're interested in too, then even they just can't get enough.
Yeah. Tell me, the idea of this armadillo.
Yeah.
Is there, you told me that, the odd fact about the frozen flamingo. Wow, frozen. I like that alliteration. Kind of inspired the flamingos. Well, what inspired the armadillo?
The armadillo was a whole process to get to, actually. He started out as a weasel, which actually it ended up being a little too on the nose. He kind of had more of a traveling snake oil salesman vibe to him in the first draft of this book. And my agent and my editor both wisely pointed out that that's not really a reference kids will get. So always important to remember that. So I ended up shifting the tone of Frank to be more like of a kid that's just, positive about these things that seem right, using kid logic. And it works so much better that way. But then, so once I kind of left that, it didn't fit with the weasel anymore. And so then I had to find a new, animal. And the challenge was trying to find something that could hold its own, with a flamingo, because they're so like visually interesting, and instantly recognizable. And I wanted something that was very visually interesting and recognizable. And I went through, I don't know, I think probably 10 different sketches and just drew them next to my flamingo character. But the second that I drew an armadillo, I kind of fell in love with him. So, and the fact that he like rolls up into a little ball when he gets like unsure, I just thought that was a fun added characteristic to show.
Yeah, yeah. So as you're creating characters, do you kind of have to see the character, being sketched out, or are you seeing it in your mind first?
It does vary. With animals, I usually have to sketch it out. I see parts, and there's like usually a feature or two that I want to highlight on the animal, and I know is going to be there. With the expert character, I knew he was going to have these big bushy eyebrows, so that kind of was a constant through all of them to show just as like sort of that I don't know, professorial almost feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But then like playing around with the looks and the features of the character is always kind of fun and exciting, and it's always kind of a surprise by the end, which is fun for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. If you are surprised by the characters that you create, is it, you mentioned that you are, is it, you kind of do something, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoa, look at that. I didn't expect that, but that line just changes everything. Yeah,
that happened a lot. There were some versions of Frank that didn't work because I ended up having to write a completely different story for them, because they're just, when I drew them, their personality and their like relationship with the flamingo changed things. And so it's always this like, it's funny how like one little thing can shift everything in a story. It was a fun puzzle.
Yeah. I remember that we did a short series called Drawing with Your Kids, and there we had an illustrator come on, and he was going to teach us how to draw a library dragon. And he's doing a circle and a line, and I'm looking, I'm like, oh, that's just shapes. That's not. And he just did one thing, just one little line, and then the dragon just appeared. It was like magic. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Where did your love for drawing and illustration come? When did it start?
So for me, the drawing has always been the first thing that I did. I'm newer to writing, but so, I mean, as long as I can remember, I was drawing. I feel like it wasn't until maybe third grade that I knew that that's what I wanted to do for a living. And then even then, my path has kind of meandered in and out of it. I didn't really start doing picture books until 10 years ago. So.
And as you were growing up and telling people, I want to be an illustrator when I grow up, did you have somebody in the background going, yeah, okay, but you need a plan B when that doesn't work out?
I mean, yeah, there's always a little bit of that. My parents were very supportive, so of whatever I did, they always tried to find, the business angle of that, how that works, but still supporting it in a way. So I was lucky with that.
One of the reasons I jokingly asked that question is because I think almost all of the illustrators who've been on, who've answered that in one way, it's always been the same. It's like, my parents were supportive of that.
Yeah, I think it is. It's very important to be supportive, and because your parents' opinion matters so much, especially when you're younger. I mean, you're looking for approval, and so why not, try and help them with the thing that they love and just try and support it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I do with my kids too. I have one daughter that loves acting. And so, there's always that little voice as a parent that's like, oh, but how are you going to make a living doing that? But, she'll figure it out, and we'll figure it out. We'll figure out with her. And if that's what she wants to do, then she'll keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And kids do figure it out. It's funny. you were mentioning your daughter. My daughter too was the lead in all the school musicals, and she danced and was the best dancer at all the studios that she went to, and because I was performing, she would come out and perform with me. Everybody had her future lined up, and it was like, oh yeah, she's gonna be on stage, she's gonna do this. And she came to me one day, and when she was in high school, and she said, yeah, I want to be backstage. I don't want to be out in front of the stage. She's carved a very successful life for herself, away from the spotlight.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. Yeah. It can, but that came about too, just because of the exposure, I think, to all the aspects of it. And I think that's a fun and interesting part of it, is just like being able to explore all the different things and figure out which part works for you.
Yeah. I noticed on your website that you, Do You Really Know Flamingos? You're the author illustrator. I also noticed that you've illustrated other authors' books. Is the process different? As you're going in, you're receiving a manuscript from somebody else, and they're telling that half of the story. How is it different from doing your own story?
So the very first book that I ever had published was as just an illustrator. And I completely feel blessed that even came about, because I had pitched a couple books to a publisher and they passed on those, but they're like, there's this other project that we think you might be a good fit for. And it happens to be Dev Petty, who is just, an amazing author too. But they sent me this book, the story, The Bear Must Go On. And it's such a funny and relatable book about stage fright, speaking of stages and performing. That I instantly fell in love with it, and I started seeing the characters almost immediately in my head. That was a case where the main character I did see pretty clearly, the bear. So the story was provided, and it was pretty open to interpretation. There were a couple of notes to me in the manuscript, but it was a smooth process. I don't know. I really enjoyed that process too. It's been interesting because I've done a little bit of each aspect. There was a series for Scholastic that I was just the author on. That was a completely different process too. But it's helped me just learn a little bit of the industry and just the process, and see things from everybody's perspective along the way.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use the word industry. Children's books is an industry. I had the pleasure of going to the International Children's Book Festival a couple of years ago in Bologna, Italy. I had no idea how big of an industry it is.
That's a dream. Yeah, I've never been, but I would love to someday.
It is crazy. For the author, the creator that's out there that is thinking of themselves as, well, I'm an artiste, I'm an author, I just want it to flow from my being, put it on the page. That's not really realistic. Can you give that person a little bit of advice in how they might look at the industry a bit differently?
Yeah, I think that I always like to remember that the idea of like a lone genius or a lone artistic genius is a myth. Everybody has like a support system around them. And in the picture book world, it's your agent, it's your editor, it's your art director. You're all, your goal is the same. I think a lot of times people think that they are, trying to fight for their, vision. But I think if you just kind of shift your perspective a little bit and think, we're all trying to make the best book possible, and you can take feedback without losing your voice. I think that's a fear for a lot of artists, is losing their voice in it. But I have a background in advertising, so I think for me, I've dealt with a lot of feedback over the years. And in advertising, you always look for the note behind the note. So whatever the note is, it's usually, it's reacting to something in the story. And so you just have to figure out your solution for that, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times that you have kids. What's it like as you're creating the illustrations? I know you run it by the editor and your art director. Do you also run the illustrations by your kids too to see how they're thinking about them?
Oh yeah, of course. You have to. I mean, they're the whole point. They're the audience. So they're getting older now. So, I mean, they're still love to be the first critics for me.
Yeah. What do they, now that they're older, what do they think about their dad being an author illustrator of great kids books?
I mean, I like to think that they're still proud. My youngest just graduated from 5th grade this past week. And so this book came out last week, and their last day of school is tomorrow. So I really wanted to squeeze in a school visit. I was able to squeeze in a school visit with her school right before she left the elementary school. And, she didn't seem embarrassed. She came over and gave me a hug. So that was nice. I really enjoyed being able to go to her school.
You know, that's funny. I had a lot of performers when I became a dad. They would tell me, oh, yeah, it's great. They're going to love it when they're 4 or 5. But once they get to school, they're not going to want anybody to know that you perform or write kids or whatever. And, I had the opposite experience.
Yeah, I haven't had that, for me at least.
Yeah. Now, I'm a little bit jealous of you living in Kansas City. I love Boston, but we don't have any good barbecue here in Boston. And man, when I visited Kansas City, there was some great barbecue.
The best in the world. Absolutely. Yeah. Next time you're in town, I'll have to show you the best places. There's a couple that you can't miss.
All right. We'll have to do that. In the meantime, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Do You Really Know Flamingos and find out more about you.
So my website is btoddbooks.com. You can see links to all the books that I have out now. Do You Really Know Flamingos is anywhere books are sold. So go online. Online is going to be probably the easiest place to find it, but anywhere online you can get to it. And yeah, I've got an Instagram at HeyBTodd.
All right. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author and illustrator of Do You Really Know Flamingos? Our guest has been Brandon Todd. Hey, Brandon, thanks so much. And when we stop recording, you can tell me the barbecue place to go to.
All right. Thanks, Ed.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. If this episode made you smile or gave you something to think about, please consider sharing a link to the show with someone you love. Leave a 5-star review and, of course, subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on X, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Reading with Your Kids, and our website is readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Joy McCullough. Please be sure to check out Kestrel Takes Flight, her great, powerful new middle grade novel in verse. I also want to thank Brandon Todd. Please be sure to check out Do You Really Know Flamingos? I want to thank my team, Daylene Rose, Advina Lopez, Chris Doherty, Ella Badier. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support and love she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids. Hey, this is a message for all the authors that are listening. You know, you worked hard on your book. You spent months, maybe years, writing, revising, dreaming, and believing. You created characters, solved problems, overcame doubts, and brought a story into the world that only you could tell. Now it's time to help readers discover it. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program was created to celebrate outstanding children's books and to help authors reach more families. When a book earns our seal of approval, we don't stop with an award certificate. We review the book, feature it on the podcast, share it across social media, and help introduce it to parents, teachers, librarians, and caregivers who are looking for great books to share with kids. Because your story matters. And the families who need your story deserve a chance to find it. Please visit readingwithyourkids.com and click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to learn more. That's readingwithyourkids.com. Let your book find the readers it was written for.